Okay, so we talked about trade packages for Timo Meier in the previous episode with Jersey Joe and Jake Wakely. But what's worst case scenario? Because the Devils do need to look at some backup options in case the deal for Timo Meier falls through. There's a lot to talk about in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. So today is usually when I do a game recap episode because the New Jersey Devils just played the Montreal Canadiens. However, I did put out on my Twitter, what would you rather have wanted? Did you want a game recap or did you want to hear trade discussions part 2 with Jersey Joe and Jake Wakely? So I gave you guys the option on Twitter and a majority voted that you wanted to see trade discussions part 2, albeit I did put the poll up for only a few hours, but I figured since it was overwhelmingly trade discussions part 2, I figured that speaks for most of the people who listen to the show. So I said, all right, let's do trade discussions part 2. But here are my thoughts, like quick thoughts about the game against the Montreal Canadiens. So it was not a good effort from the New Jersey Devils. Obviously, they lost 5-2, and they gave up an empty netter. Dawson Mercer was able to score. I guess he heard the trade rumors. Jesper Bratt was able to score. Vitek Vanecek wasn't really sharp. We couldn't really sub him out because Mackenzie Blackwood was out due to injury, and Akira Schmid was just recently brought up from Utica only a few hours before the game. And as you guys know, Akira Schmid tends to get a little nervous in those types of circumstances. So I think Vitek Vanecek stayed in the game until he would have gotten hypothetically hurt. So it was a disappointing game. And for a majority of the season, the Devils have been dominating Canadian teams. I believe this is only their second or third loss to a team up north. But nonetheless, it's just a loss, and they're going to rebound from it. Lindy Ruff did reveal that some players were feeling a little under the weather, but we'll see what happens. But ultimately, I've held you guys up enough, so we're not going to do a game recap episode. Here is Trade Discussions Part 2, featuring Jersey Joe and Jake Wakely. Take it away. So, Jake, we were just talking about like prospects and trade packages for Timo Meier, and you had a thought that you wanted to share, but unfortunately, we ran out of time on the previous recording. So, what did you want to share this time around as we continue our discussion with trade packages for the Devils?
So, actually, before you got this back up, I was just reading David Pagnotta's article that he just released at about 5 o'clock. And just some tips. He put word is that New Jersey wants Timo Meier and said, can they get it to the finish line this week ahead of next week's trade deadline? So obviously, so now it's like, okay, so that tells me talks are heating up. So could we see a deal this week? I think if we're going to see a deal this week, it's going to be, I personally don't think we're going to see it this week. I think if we do see a deal, it's going to be probably anywhere between the 27th of February and the 3rd of March. I think that's when you're going to see it as we get closer to the deadline.
Now, I did hear a report from Christy Flannery, who also tweeted about something about the Jeff Merrick and Elliot Freeman 32 Thoughts. And basically, Christy informed the Devils fan base that Tom Fitzgerald has told the Sharks organization that before you accept any other Timo Meier deals, give us a call. So basically, I think that the mindset for the Devils is whatever, it's a classic movie line, like I said in a previous episode, which is whatever they're paying you, I'll double it kind of thing. So if there's a trade package, I think the Devils, this is their deal to lose, quite honestly. But we need to keep in mind that either A, they're going to miss out on Timo Meier. B, they could get Timo Meier, but it's going to cost them a bit. And people might feel a little conflicted about it. Like, we got the deal done, but at what cost? Or C, everyone is happy with the trade. We get Timo Meier. We still have Jesper Bratt, hopefully signed long-term after this year is up. And we also have Timo Meier signed long-term. And Now the Devils finally get a big name player that they were yearning for during the course of the prior offseason. Or D, we're going to have to go to plan B when it comes to trade deals, because maybe a Timo Meier trade won't occur, because the fact of the matter is I don't think the Sharks have to trade Timo Meier. It's not dire, but it's really something you should consider it, given the state of their organization.
And the qualifying offer that you have to give them, that's like $10 million.
Exactly. So
I think, and so, okay, now the point I was going to make was, the Islanders lose. Like, it's at the point where, like, I think it's time for that guy to retire. Like, it's just like, I just feel like that Bo Horvat contract's going to backfire big time on the Islanders. But,
see, and I talked to Jersey Joe about this in a prior trade package deal, which was, I don't want Bo Horvat, because it's just like, it seems like it's a name that's good on paper, but it just wouldn't work for the Devils, because we already got our two starting centers and Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, 1-2 punch. Where does Horvat slide in? Like, we're not going to move Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier to a winger position. They're too small. And for Horvat, it's just like, do you put him on? You don't want to make him a bottom six center, nor do you want to move him to a winger position and that not work out. So I agree with you heartily.
And, the Rangers got Tarasenko, and obviously nobody knows if he's going to re-sign there or not. But, Ryan O'Reilly, same thing. But all these teams are going and getting these rentals while the Devils are looking at it like, you know what? Let's go get a piece here for the long haul, as our Stanley Cup window just opened. And, you got him for the foreseeable future. You can play him with Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier, whoever you want. You can, you have options. And like, I asked my buddy who's a diehard Leafs fan, I said, yes or no, the Devils win a Stanley Cup in Jack Hughes' career with the Devils. And he said, his answer was quick and said, easily yes. So it's just a matter of when, obviously. And, Jersey Joe and Trey, we've had this conversation, and we said this before. The Devils were going to become good once you started to see the Penguins and, the Flyers and the Capitals and stuff all start to go downhill, right? And we started seeing that this year. The Capitals, even though they're 1 point out of a playoff spot, they're not what they were.
No, they're old.
Pittsburgh's definitely not.
They're old. Like the Penguins, Capitals, and Islanders.
They're hockey old.
Yeah, going into the season, you just listed 3 of the oldest teams going into this year, and I said that's an X factor you need to look at. So, I have huge respect for the Penguins organization wanting to keep their band together, and Crosby, Malkin, and Letang, but they're old. You got to move on from them, with all due respect. Like I said, I know they've won Stanley Cups together, and it's refreshing to see that they're loyal. But at the same time, it's not a good long-term solution. Alexander Ovechkin, one of the greatest players to ever play this game. Father Time is undefeated for a reason. So it's just like, could Alexander Ovechkin at his age carry the team back to somewhat relevancy or be competitive? They just won a Stanley Cup a few years ago. It's just like that window is closing. Islanders, I don't know what Lou's doing at this point.
I don't want to disrespect Lou, but like, Lou of old now, this Lou is ready to have a nice cocktail somewhere on Montauk and Long Island. I'm just going to throw that out there, but like, his best days are behind him. And not to brag being a Devils fan, like, Tom Fitzgerald is more of an asset management guy, like a real good specialist, and making sure that like the Devils get a guy like a Timo Meier who will not just get you one and done, but like save you like 10 really bad trade deadline headaches over the years. Just think about that. Would you rather have one really hard, headache, or 10 really hard headaches? I'd rather this one be the one where fans are happy with, and the media's like, holy crow, they actually did it. They got it. And, we got plenty of prospects to make up for, like I said on the previous cut, that, they got plenty of guys that can make a jump to the Devils and be part of that next like 5, 8 to 10 years and go from there. and the Devils won't be really handcuffed. They will in the down in the dirty of Palat's contract, they can move him within the 3 of 6 years left when Palat starts to slow down. I don't see that handcuffing them too much, but the Devils are doing a lot better than, you know, like the Islanders. They're the epitome of what getting old and handcuffed is.
Oh, here's my thing. Yes, we get Timo Meier, and yes, we have the surgence of Jack Hughes. But here's one thing I don't want you guys to forget, and I've talked about on the show before. Oh, and Christy Flannery has brought it up when she's appeared on the show too. She was actually quite satisfied that the Devils missed out on Johnny Gaudreau and all of them, because here's the problem she says she had when signing those players, like long-term deals. You can't build around them because you're going to be because your money is going to be maxed out. So it's just like, look at the Edmonton Oilers. They have Connor McDavid, one of the greatest hockey players to ever play. They got Leon Draisaitl, who's also an MVP type of player. And yet they can't build around those two. Like, you would think, like, just ask a non-hockey fan. Okay, they have the greatest player to ever play the game, or one of. And they got another MVP caliber player who's sometimes in the shadow of player A, which is Connor McDavid, and that's Leon Draisaitl. But yet, if you were to ask a non-hockey fan, could they win the Stanley Cup or the championship? Someone would say, yes, absolutely. But hockey fans know the Oilers can't build around those two. That's why they're never a legitimate threat to win the Stanley Cup, despite having all that talent. So it's one thing I want you guys to be cognizant about, which is Jack Hughes. Yes, he is great. I'd say he's a once-in-a-generation type player for the Devils organization. We might not get another player like him. And quite honestly, based on where his career is going, and I talked with Bruce Driver, Jack Hughes is on pace to becoming the greatest skater to ever play in a Devils uniform. I know it's early, but I don't think it's that crazy or out of the ordinary, considering the fact that his competition is like people like Patrick Elias or Taylor Hall. And I think he's going to surpass both of them. So it's just like, what do the Devils do? Like, they get Timo Meier, you get Jesper Bratt re-signed. Okay, that's great. Jack Hughes is signed long-term. Nico Hischier is signed long-term. Jesper Bratt is signed long-term. Doug Hamilton is signed long-term. And Timo Meier, hypothetically, is signed long-term. You got 5 players, and also Andre Palat, signed to long-term deals. And Jonas Siegenthaler, I'll throw him into the mix, but he's at a much cheaper penny. Does that team win a Stanley Cup, and could they still build around those players? Because you even said, Jersey Joe, if the Devils get Timo Meier and if they resign Jesper Bratt, don't expect a wild offseason from them.
No, I will say this. I did a hockey prospecting squaring of Jesper Bratt and Timo Meier. They literally have almost the identical numbers and literally star players in this league. And they have just about the same amount of points per game and a very similar goal to assist scoring ratio. And it's so similar that having both a Bratt and a Meier could easily like make it even twice as hard for teams to defend when the Devils go on the offensive. But when they bring up the defensive players, that cheap contract money will help in the nearer term and longer term.
And to double down on that too, the salary cap for the Devils is obviously going to get really tighter with a Meier extension and a Bratt extension. And, if all else fails, you bring in Timo Meier, you take a run at it this year, you sign Meier to a long-term contract. If discussions aren't going well with Jesper Bratt, because we've seen, in the past, they're a drag with his agent and whatnot. And, if you end up being forced to trade Jesper Bratt, then you're going to be bringing back a solid package where you can still add to the team and stuff. And then you added a guy like Timo Meier, and then you can still add different players around him. Obviously, we prefer Jesper Bratt and Timo Meier, but if worse comes to worse, you also have to think about that as well. You trade Jesper Bratt too, and you can bring in a nice package, whether it's more defensemen, another forward. But I still say yes, you can win a Stanley Cup with that core because, whether you have guys on entry-level contracts or you sign guys, you do what Tampa did. They brought in a guy like Nick Paul. They gave him like $3.5 million. Players of that caliber on cheaper contracts, and then you play them in the bottom six and whatnot, and then you can put them with guys like Dawson Mercer, and then you're rolling 3 lines deep in the playoffs, and then you move into your fourth line, which obviously I think they'll keep him for this year. But before I get into the last two guys, before I quickly have to jump off here because I got to go do some walking around here at work, but I'll say the Devils' bottom six will look a lot different than it does right now after March 3rd.
And I would agree with you. And actually, this brings up my last talking point. And I saved it for last because it's worst case scenario. Let's just say hypothetically, Devils don't get Timo Meier. I've already heard Jersey Joe's thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts, Jake. What is plan B, C, D, whatever?
Now, we've heard the name Brock Besser, which I could 100% see that happening. But I think Brock Besser also wants to go to Minnesota because that's where he's from. I've been told keep an eye on Ivan Barbashev from St. Louis. Obviously, we've heard Frank Cervelli say late first, but I think you could get him for a second and a prospect. The Devils are interested in him. They're also interested in a guy like Max Domi from Chicago, although Max wants to stay in Chicago, but he doesn't have a trade protection, so he doesn't really get a say if they get a deal and they move him and whatnot. But, another name that's been brought up, and this all depends if the team can retain some salary, is Adam Henrique. And I'm not against it. Like I am, but I'm not.
It's a reunion.
It's a reunion, and that's like a Lou thing, right? Like you would always bring guys back. But if Henrique's coming in and he's playing third line center, then I'm not mad at going into the playoffs with Hughes, Heischer, and Henrique as my 3 centers going into the playoffs. I think that's fantastic. But I definitely think the Devils could afford to, Timo Meier. Then I would look at a guy like Max Domi or an Ivan Barbashev, kind of maybe a James Van Riemsdyk, but more so I'd lean more Barbashev and Domi just because the Devils could afford to add some nastiness and some sandpaper to their lineup for come playoff time because we know how physical that Rangers series is going to get.
Well, Jake, I want to appreciate you for taking the time to appear on the show. I know you got to get back to work, and Jersey Joe and I will close out the show. So before I let you go, where can everyone find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at Wakes3019 and currently in discussions, but not official yet. Jim and I are actually working on doing either a Twitter space or starting up our own little talk show thing via Zoom and whatnot. So, it's just a matter of when both of us are free. Obviously, this time close to the deadline, we're obviously both busy and whatnot with work and what he's doing. And then obviously the hockey stuff outside of work and whatnot and family time. But yeah, so Jim and I are kind of in the midst of doing some final touches on doing our own show and whatnot like that. So we'll discuss the Devils and like all stuff around the NHL and everything like that. And yeah, let's hope the Devils make a big move here.
Watch as they do before this episode goes live, like it did with Matthew Tkachuk. But Jake, thanks so much. We'll let you get back to work. And Jersey Joe, we're gonna close out the show. So, Jake, thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
I want you guys to snack a little healthier, so I'm going to tell you about Built Bar. So looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories, you got to try a Built Bar. I know during the holiday season, your New Year's resolution was to eat happier and eat healthier, so you got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't even think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolutions. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, are covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but somehow, some way, only 130 calories, and 4 grams of sugars with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head over to the nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. And now, do you want to make some extra money? I know I certainly do. So I'm going to tell you about FanDuel. So the midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because their new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from money line to point scores and three-pointers drained. So go Lakers. Hopefully they can get into that play-in position. So you know the drill. Head over to our friends at Locked On Bets for all your betting needs there as well. And make sure you always gamble responsibly. Okay, Jersey Joe, you and I are going, like I said, are going to close out the show. So he said Barbashev, and you recently sent me an article that you wrote for Pucks and Pitchforks, the site that we work at. So how are you feeling about Barbashev, and what's plan B, C, and D for the Devils?
All right. So if the Devils don't get Meier, they can get Ivan Barbashev, someone who could add a little extra oomph and emphasis to the second and third lines and could add a little extra finish along with Sandpaper. Now, Buchnevich is secondly my C guy as well. So I need a big guy who can score goals, play physical, play make as well, but who can shoot the puck as well and be good in the playoffs. Now, with that being said, I mentioned before Max Domi. I mean, he does have a lot of interest out there. He's been mentioned before by Dave Pagnotta and the guys at the fourth period. So that's another guy there I like with grit and sandpaper. Yes, he's 5'11", but he plays bigger than his size.
But the thing is like people have been raving about Devils are already too small.
And then you got the idea of the Florida Panthers and the Anaheim Ducks. I really want to see Frank Vatrano from the Ducks. I know he's had a very bad year so far. I just think it's the chemistry that he has in Anaheim, and it's not a team that he can feed off of. And he feeds off of teams that are contenders, and he has playoff experience. The East Long native, Massachusetts, really needs to come out east and play the heavy hockey and be a good shooter once again. And he brings that power forward game for a fair price if he takes a reduced salary from Anaheim. I really think that Sam Bennett, could be someone of a Andrew Brunette take as well, because like Vatrano, Bennett, and a couple of other guys from Florida seem to be on their radar, and I think that is something that will be a reoccurring theme, kind of like how in the past the Devils have gone into Pittsburgh and maybe Columbus in some areas. But Columbus, if they do get a goaltender for the Devils to help out Jonas Korpisalo, I really want to get him, or get Montreal's Montembeault, because his numbers for goals expected are really good for a team that's rebuilding, and I think the Devils should hunt him down.
All right, final question for you. Jonas Siegenthaler was recently a healthy scratch, and obviously Nate Bastian was also a healthy scratch, and seems like the BMW line has sputtered and crashed. So that BMW is no good, and no used car salesman will take it.
Nope.
And there was a rumor going around saying, is Jonas Siegenthaler on trade watch? And James Nichols shut it down, and Ryan Novozinski as well. And I kind of just assumed it's just like, well, he's signed to a long-term deal, and yes, it's a cheap deal, but at the same time, it's just like, I don't think that's an easy sell. I don't think the Devils would trade away Jonas Siegenthaler. I think this is just a way for Lindy Ruff just to see, just to give the lineup some life for it, and just maybe to show everyone like, hey, no, your spot's not safe unless your name is Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier. your spot on the roster is not safe. So, because I remember Lindy Ruff said, like, if you don't pull up your weight, expect to get scratched. Because I remember going behind the scenes of the Devils, and James Nichols and Amanda Stein asked, like, why was Fabian Zetterlund a healthy scratch, and why was Miles Wood continuing, or no, why was Eric Holla continuing to play?
Well, let me throw this in there. So, like, James Nichols is always on the money, just like Ryan Novozinski. I
Two
will
friends of my
throw
show. Two friends of my show.
the really great sources I rely on heavily, and I will throw this in there. The Devils, like I said earlier, they're holding each other accountable. And this sport is a cooperative sport. You have to have every player pulling their own weight. If you're not going to hip check, you're not going to poke check, you're not going to stick lift properly, if you're not going to chip in, scoring power play goals or assists or any of that matter, you're going to be sitting because other than that, you're going to be shitting your pants in this press box. And I'm not afraid to say that out loud because this team has been holding each other accountable all year long. And it's only a matter of time when the Devils get a player like a Timo Meier or Buchnevich or Barbashev to really help like put pressure on the current guys and be like, hey, we just brought this guy in because we know he can do a really good job. And we need to make sure that we scare other opponents in, day out. We want this fan base to be rowdy consistently. We want to win more games in the near term and the future. And the Rock is a very raucous building this year. And this team's starting to earn respect again. We're being feared, and other teams are starting to realize that a dynasty is being built and we're not going to burn anything down.
Exactly. And I just want to get some final thoughts from you before we close out. So, anything you want to share to the audience listening?
So if you're looking for me doing more videos on top of my audio form podcast on Heads Up Hockey, uh, I not only have it on Anchor.fm, you'll see now that this background is the virtual background as well on my StreamYard. So I paid a little extra to help, make the channel be more official and trying to grow it as well. You could see my work at Pucks and Pitchforks as well as Trey's, and I will be out west visiting family in California. And if anything breaks, I'll try and do an episode, but it won't be that easy. But I will certainly tweet something out, and then when I come back, I'll do something to help, you know, cater to you, the listeners. And don't be afraid to like, subscribe to Trey's Locked On Devils, Neil Villapiano State of Mind podcast, Devil State of Mind, and Heads Up Hockey here on YouTube. So don't be afraid to look at me at Jersey Joe 11 underscore NJ, as well as talking with Trey on Locked On Devils on Twitter. And don't be afraid to buy your tickets to every Devils game because this is a fun year and we wanted to be as loud consistently and keep as many opponent fans out of the building.
I've been to 8 games, and all 8 of them have been rowdy. So, Jersey Joe and also Jake Wakely, who had to hop off. But thank you for joining me on this special 2-part episode. Talked about everything. We talked about Timo Meier, trade packages, backup plans, the current state of the team, and what's to come. Jersey Joe, pleasure as always, my man.
Pleasure as always to help this fan base listen to more Devils content. And if you see me in section 123, don't be afraid to say hi. I might be at American Whiskey or Reds or wherever on Tuesday. So if you see me, don't be afraid to say hello.
I love American whiskey. Thank you, Jersey Joe.
You're welcome. Thank you.